Samueli Institute headquarters in Alexandria, Virginia, this is On Human Flourishing. I'm Dr. Wayne Jonas. Our guest today is Dr. Kent Bradley, former Chief Medical Officer for Safeway. Before leading the charge in healthcare programs for that national grocery chain, Dr. Bradley served as a colonel in the U.S. Army. Among his many assignments there was Chief Medical Officer for an infantry division. And when he left the Army in 2008, Dr. Bradley worked as a health services consultant. Most recently, he became the Executive Director of Core Veritas, a nonprofit focused on team-based leadership development in schools, organizations, and communities. Welcome, Dr. Bradley. I'm really interested in getting your thoughts on sort of the whole issue of value of investment. You just talked about sort of mission versus money and the balance between that. And certainly in nonprofits, they put mission out there, but they're always looking for money. And in for-profits, generally they're getting money, but they also want to have a public service and a public mission. Most companies do, not all, but many. And this sort of tension between the return on investment, which is sort of a business bottom line, and the value on investment that draws a wider framework for where the resources grow has been a core sort of theme of the Institute recently, as we've been looking at trying to see how do you invest in healing as opposed to treatment, and not as opposed to, but in addition to treatment, and come out with a more balanced approach in healthcare. We have a healthcare system that is really not giving us the kind of value it used to. Our costs are going up, our health metrics are going down, especially around chronic illnesses. We have a fabulous acute care system, yet we're clearly not getting the value out of healthcare investment and healthcare spending that we got 100 years ago. So much so that it's sucking resources out of other things in our society. So as someone who was mission focused in the military for a long time and then went over and was focused in business, and I know you got an MBA also and got trained in that, how do you provide that value? Is there a way of looking at and realigning the investment component on the things that are providing us value?
Yeah, I think there is a way, but I will step back before I dive into some thoughts on that to a general framework that I use when I think about value. For me, value is what you say, or what you feel, what you believe is important. And so we often talk about shareholder value, and we immediately jump as a corporation to believe that the shareholder is only concerned about their financial return. But we know that people are making decisions all the time on the nature of the business by which they choose to invest their dollars. So they obviously are making choices that are predicated as well on what that business is all about. So immediately it kind of shakes up this notion that value in business equates to money. It doesn't. So what is the value of the investment as it pertains to health? Well, an organization is made up of people. And if you were to ask that organization what's really important, if they say the people are really important, that's what they value. So what are the investments that are going in to support the people, and what's critically important to them? And most people that we talk about when I was in the military, and you look at the top 3 or 4 things that bubble up in family support surveys and questions directly to individual service members and their families, health is always in the top 2. Finances is up there as well. But so you ask what's important to the people, and which you are saying is a really important part of your investment. It's their health. So that then begs the question, what are the programs and service offerings, and what's the environment and the levers we have at our disposal that creates that value return? Again, assuming that value return is what's important to the people of the organization, and they are saying their health is important. Well, it's complex. There's a lot of variables. It's everything from, ensuring that we provide the resources necessary that makes healthy choices easier for them from a physical, but it's also in the mental and the spiritual, whether you offer or make aware classes that could be available to them, whether it's meditation type classes or the work environment and the hours that people are. It goes into a lot of different dynamics, but it gets to that fundamental question of what truly do you value, and then what kind of investments will align with what you say is important. And I do believe people are not just on the expense side of the equation. Right. People are on the revenue side of the equation. They're the ones who are producing the goods and services. Right. They're the productivity needs that a company has a real, a desire. We talk about talent management and retention. There's a lot of things that are really important to a business. So first off, that's how I'd frame it. I'd go even further and say that there's been a lot of talk about ROI, return on investment, and I think a somewhat difficult task of quantifying dollar spend for dollar return. When we think about how we apply that for other investments, they tend to be capital investments. Okay. So I know that if I build out this particular building or buy this piece of equipment, I can amortize that cost, and I can generate a model on revenue, like how many MRIs I'm going to do, and I'm going to buy this MRI machine, and therefore I can get a return on investment, an ROI off of that. And I can actually calculate my internal rate of return and do all my math calculations for that. That model, when it applies to people, is much more difficult. For one thing, we don't necessarily truly quantify the revenue piece of that. We don't really understand the amortization. Right. We're investing in people. Right. We're not a machine. Right. So the model that is and I think we got stuck in this rut because of all the programs that were being inserted into self-insured employers. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be.
Right. But they were seen as costs.
Yes.
Rather than investments. Is that part of what you're saying?
And so how at the very beginning, you're now looking at cutting costs, and that's your revenue.
Right.
And you are inserting a program to reduce the cost of your program as your means of generating your ROI. And I would say that, in my time at Safeway, I was fortunate enough to witness a significant reduction in healthcare costs during the time I was there, and that trajectory had started before I arrived, and it just was continued when I was there. But even then, I was hesitant to go down that ROI conversation. From a business perspective, they love to see a negative trend. Right. on the cost trajectory. Right. Mm-hmm. But we haven't done a very good job, I think, as organizations thinking through this value on investment and inserting different variables that we could agree to are very important. I liken it to what has happened in the area of sustainability. I say that because there was a time when folks would question the need to be environmentally conscious. Right. people would question, this whole carbon footprint issue, right? I would say today there are very few companies that don't have recycling in their offices. They're not thinking about the certification of their buildings, the light bulbs they're using, and thinking about how they can have an impact on their environment. Yet when you think about it, each one of those individual acts are like taking that starfish and throwing it back in the water. I mean, you're doing your little part, but really how big, but I could save that one, right? So, but it is now almost what is expected of business.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, we are making a difference.
Yeah.
And it's also making a difference in the people who show up for work. They feel connected, that they're contributing to something, and it's aligning with their values, what they feel as is important. They feel the environment's important, and the organization meets them by offering them programs that aligns with what they think is important. So I think increasingly people value their health, and companies need to be aligning what they're doing to meet them with what they value, and therefore offering programs and services. And again, to me, that's going to be part of the next sustainability movement. I think the next kind of construct is what are we doing to support our most precious resource, one another.
Right, So the sustainability example that you just gave, sort of the greening of business, if you will, the greening of health in business could be sort of the next effort. What turns that around? Is it demand by the public, by employees, by employers? I mean, how does that change occur? What are the levers, if you will, for the culture to create a greening of health in business?
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting play of a convergence of forces, and I think that convergence of forces is already taking place in the health. If we go back to the environmental movement, if you will, or increasing awareness and alignment to that, there was behavior that got to the point that caused significant enough concern that regulation and policy started to get put in place. Pollution standards. You can't just dump things in the river. But there was also a general shift in the attitudes of people about what was responsible behavior. And so there was this policy, kind of a heavy-handed approach,
right,
but there was also
down.
this bottoms-up grassroots effect. And those two merged with some frameworks that then began to identify organizations that did this better than others. And once that framework came about, I think you saw companies now recognizing that what they represented into the community should be aligned with this construct, and they would want to be recognized as a environmentally conscious organization. And then the science caught up, to say, hey, we have data that shows that you're actually saving money as a business. But they didn't lead with that.
I see.
There was a huge cost to clean up the factories, to institute these programs. There's a huge upfront costs, and that was part of the inertia. But I think the data now suggests that companies are saving a lot of money by doing certain things that are reducing waste within the company. And so I'm hopeful that the same interesting confluence of pressure through different policy and governmental things that are happening, whether with healthcare reform and the greater awareness, and as well as this a desire, grassroots, for people to live healthier lives, and their awareness of what that means and what they put in their bodies and how they interact with their environment and the choices they're making, along with now this healthiest employer award and this concepts that are being more and more promulgated, that you see, cities and states saying they want to be the healthiest, right? So that stuff is in Washington D.C., by the way, was viewed as one of the fittest, or one of the greatest environments for health, at least in D.C. proper. San Francisco was, I think, number 2 in this poll. I think, anyways, you have to look at the metrics on how they made that decision. But my point is this: cities are wanting to be recognized as a place that is conducive to health.
Right.
So now you have this alignment of these 3 forces that I think could propel this to become more mainstream.
So you see these sort of forces coming together, and what you've described are sort of policy forces, as you've described, but then attitudes, public attitudes. Then there are examples of companies that are doing it better. And pathways. I guess the framework provides pathways for other companies to say, okay, here's the way we can do it also, or we can utilize that. Is that?
Yeah, because those early adopters kind of paved the way with a map for others to follow, so it makes it easier. The barrier to entry, if you will, for other companies is lowered, and so now they can come on board, and so I think that's what's happening in America today.
So we have a program here called the Wellness Initiative in the Nation, or Wellness in the Nation, WIN. I think you've heard about it. And what we're trying to do is sort of facilitate this dialogue, and you've described it, I think, almost exactly, which is how do you bring the policymakers who are trying to tweak the finance and policy levers, the corporate culture, the corporate leaders who are saying we need to pay attention to this, and the community and the public groups that are saying this is important for the community. We need everybody to begin to work together. So we're trying to facilitate this sort of crosstalk between the public and the corporate, private sector, and the governmental sector. To move in this direction. But as you've said, it sounds like it's already happening in those areas. And so, sparking this in some way is an area that we're looking for and looking how to do that. And I think, but what you said was very interesting. I think the science and the metrics around cost savings sort of followed that. It didn't lead that. Yeah, people didn't do it just because it was going to save them money. They led because the culture began to say, we have to do this. This is important if we want a flourishing society, if we want a productive workforce, if we want a healthy environment, if we want a future for our kids. And the investment is then will lead to improved creativity, productivity, innovation, et cetera, and then this will have good ROI. This will in that framework.
So you could say that ROI in certain instances like this are clearly a lagging indicator, if you will, or lags behind the value.
Right.
Construct.
Right.
The value has to go first.
Do we need a new metric here? I mean, you can follow the stock prices of any company, public company, and see what happens, and lots of forces impact that. But and you mentioned the capital investment as being sort of key to how companies invest to try to improve and grow. But the social capital is difficult to measure, and you describe the difficulty in that. Do we need to focus on how do we measure, create a social well-being or social health index or something like that can measure somehow this human capital component?
Yeah, that's a great question. A part of me says that would be good, just like there's a Dow Jones Industrial Index for ethics and the most ethical company.
Right.
So there's these indices.
Oh, I didn't know that. There is one?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
a Dow Jones Ethical Index?
I'm pretty, there's a sustainability index.
A sustainability index, right.
But there's
Okay.
also the most
sustainability.
ethical company. I mean, Dow Jones.
Okay, great.
But there are these indices out there, whether it's on sustainability or ethics. They're out there. The most favorite place to work is another indice that gets put out.
Is engagement sort of an example of one of those? Or, yeah.
But a part of me says the most important thing from a business perspective is their profitability, and that we don't need to shy away from the fact that companies who focus on what the people within their organization value and deliver on that value will, in the long run, also be the most profitable.
Really?
And so I think that part of the issue that we have is that we're so focused on quarterly returns, and we see a lot of variability in the stock market for those publicly traded companies. But then there are a lot of companies that aren't publicly traded; they're privately held, right? But and so we may get a distortion of what we think we may get a distortion of what is important because market forces, at least in the stock, can be somewhat capricious at times if you take any single snapshot. But what do most people invest in? They're not day traders.
Right.
They're long-term investors, and they invest in a portfolio and the things that you're supposed to be doing to be a little bit more prudent in your financial investments.
Buy low and hold on.
That'd be great, right? And then exit at the right time.
Right.
But what I'm getting at is I think that this, I don't think we need to shy away from the longer-term financial investments that will reap benefit and return, with health being a part of that construct.
It sounds like you're describing sort of maybe it's not a new type of business, but another type of business than some. It's been a struggle in healthcare, but there's been persistence around patient-centered care, about making sure that the patient's needs, perspective, and participation is embedded in the care and the care team, and what they want, what they get, what they need in those areas. So this sounds like this is sort of an employee-centered business, and patient-centered care is now considered the way to go. But if you look at most practices, it's very difficult to do. And I'm wondering if a similar kind of employee-centered business might require a whole set of changes to make it the norm.
Yeah, it's interesting. The beauty of a publicly traded company is that the employees are in fact part of the shareholders or part owners, right? They may have part of their retirement fund and elected to be in the shares of the company, so they're aligned with the success of the company, and I think that's a good thing. And if you're privately held, there still is that opportunity depending on the constructs of how the company's held. I don't necessarily say it's a new type of a company that's employee-centric, because I think at its core, all companies to be successful have to focus on the people that are doing the work, and so that is it's maybe a reawakening for some, but I think a lot of organizations get this.
Get that, yeah.
But we make some assumptions around what's important and stick in this struggle around return on investment. When we haven't stepped back to say, but what's really important here? And it also gives up the fight to assume that some of the things that we are doing are too costly. Maybe there is waste in some of the programs that are offered within large corporations. Maybe that particular investment in that health and wellness program that you instituted really had hardly anyone attend, and it wasn't a very good investment because of lack of interest. That's not to say that investing in people and the health and well-being and the environment and the policies within your own company are not important.
Right.
It's kind of like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So I think there is some opportunity to be very conscious about the types of programs we institute in an organization. But I would say that companies should be doubling down on their health strategy at this point, because it aligns with what people care about.
Right. And costs.
And it impacts. I believe the data will show that thoughtfully applied programs that resonate with the people that work there will, in fact, reduce costs. That's different than just a program that you want to apply because you heard something and it doesn't align with what people really care about.
Right.
And that's, it goes back to what do the people that work in this company value, and how do you position a program that aligns with that?
Right, exactly. And the health component of that is what you're suggesting be emphasized more now in those areas.
I'll give you kind of a somewhat of a juxtaposition to what I've heard in the past. Well, our folks like to have candy and donuts, and so if we take those away, you're saying me that's important to them, and I would say no, that's not what's important to them. What's important to them, if you really ask the question, is that there is something provided for them during meetings, and that the breaking of bread at certain meetings makes it more efficient and also creates a context by which certain sharing can occur.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, if you really step back to some of that, you can figure out other ways to continue to offer that service and align with, which is also important to them, the fact that they're going to be able to retire and see their grandkids and spend some vacation time, which is also a critically important thing that they value. But we don't talk about those things.
Yeah, so it shows both a short and a long-term caring, doesn't it? Yeah, to nurture and nourish in that particular example. Well, one last area I'd like for you to talk about, maybe last, maybe not, and this is the whole area of the community. We had Steve Wolf here a while back, and he is reporting and continuing to collect data on the health trends in the nation compared to peer countries, similar countries economically around the world, and the alarming data in which the United States is declining compared to peer countries in almost all the major health metrics, except for how long we can keep people alive when they get to be old or they have cancer or something like that. Very important in some cases, in many cases, but all the other metrics seem to be going down. And the point he had demonstrated, and this IOM study demonstrated, is that the community was key to this. An investment in community development was key. No matter how much health care you threw at the community, you weren't going to turn these metrics around unless some community development occurred. And the countries that had been able to maintain or improve on those metrics had a better balance in healthcare versus community investment in those areas. And so I guess for companies, the military gets this, you got this, the community, the family, the installation, the base, you ran and oversaw the healthcare. You worked in a number of foreign countries, Rwanda, Iraq, Panama, other places where you saw the community as a key area. What are the implications of that, though, for companies and for the corporate sector? Is it possible to have be competitive and have a productive company if you're embedded in a community whose health is declining?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll go back to the environmental analogy, and that is we understood that where we source our products is important to the consumer. When you think about coffee beans, people care about, was that ethically sourced? What are the specifics? And we are getting into the supply chain when we think about some of the goods and services that are being provided in the United States. That is a supply chain of people that hasn't been really thought about. When you work in a community and your company draws from that community for its people, the community is critically important. So if we are going to be so concerned as a company about the sourcing of certain supplies, the human capital investment of sourcing should be equally thought through, meaning we should be investing in the schools and the streets and the infrastructure of the communities where we draw from. And I think companies do that. It's viewed under a philanthropic arm,
Right.
but I would say that it's a business imperative. It's not for the foundation. It's not for if you happen to have a philanthropic arm. It's part of the investment of the future of your company to draw from the community where you serve. And I guess that's a key second thought of mine is that it's where we serve. Our goods and services are purchased by the people that are in that community as well, and we serve them as customers. So we really, I think, have to be mindful of our involvement and how we're not just our image within the community, which is critically important, of course, from a brand perspective, but also just the fact that this matters.
Yeah, it can't be just to look good. It has to be because you really want to cultivate the customers and the employee base and the employee community from which employees arise.
Yeah, I think the military, I remember a few years back I had the opportunity before I joined Safeway to do some consulting work, and in one aspect I was asked to focus on the military community and this notion of what it's going to take to have a fighting force in the future based on some of these indices and the fact that the pool of qualified applicants is shrinking.
Right.
And the realization was that the numbers showed that the vast majority of people that entered the military actually had some military connection.
Yeah.
A lot of folks obviously didn't follow that trend, but a significant number. So there was an opportunity right there to think about this extension of our impact with the programs we are doing today as being a buffer for the future force.
I see.
How effective we are in supporting the family, supporting our programs for our service members, and is really cultivating our future generation.
I see.
And as we are not capacity building, we're talking about resilience. If we're not helping families become more resilient, both from an epigenetics perspective,
Right,
perhaps,
exactly,
and a direct effect,
Right.
we may be having a negative impact. So that's even more reason why we should be investing in these kinds of programs. And then there is, of course, the community at large in which the military serves, right? So there's that opportunity because people by association, maybe they're not a part of the military, but they see the military because they live in that community. And is that something that they would aspire to? And so there's things that we should be doing there
So
too.
the extension of the investment, really, you're talking about this is a future investment, or it's an investment in the future. By building good human capital today and making sure that the community, the families, are part of that investment, you're also building a workforce or a defense force or other force for future generations. So both socially, culturally, epigenetically, whatever multiple mechanisms that may occur by. So.
I think, I agree. I think most companies may or may not think about the fact that they're going to be around 20 years from now, but we have lots of examples where companies have been here for 80, 100 years. The military doesn't have a choice. We know we're going to be around
Exactly.
20 years from now. So we definitely need to be making that investment. But I would say that companies do wish to be around.
Mm-hmm.
Their leadership may not. Some of their leadership may have a more shorter term perspective, but the company itself and what the owners of the company, if you will, which are the shareholders, I would think that they want to be around as well.
Right. So I said that was going to be my last question, but now you brought up another one, which is leadership.
Yeah.
Long-term leadership, thinking long-term. The 100-year scenario, if you will, knowing that it won't be you that's around. How do you find those leaders? How do you cultivate those leaders? How do you get them into the culture? How do you get them into companies?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm very, very good at answering the question of how to find and cultivate them. But I do believe that at our core, most individuals do want to have some purpose and meaning beyond themselves, that we do care about future generations, and that we do have this desire to leave some sort of legacy. And oftentimes that legacy we're hoping is through our offspring, our kids. So I think challenging individuals and calling to mind aspirational concepts and ideas can bring out the best of folks, and that we don't assume that they don't have that ability to see the long view. I think if challenged and called, more than we would realize would rise to the occasion.
So just like by stimulating our own inherent healing capacity, we can facilitate our health, stimulating that inner desire to give back, meaning and purpose beyond yourself is there.
Absolutely.
And so tapping into that, challenging it, nurturing it, and fostering it is what you're talking about.
And it's probably one of the healthiest things a person can do.
It's also a healthy thing to do. Well, thank you for your leadership in these areas, not only through the military, but also in business and now in your new endeavor. Thank you very much for all your support and input at the Samueli Institute here also.
Super. I enjoy it. I enjoy any time I spend with you, Wayne, so thanks.
Great. On Human Flourishing is the official podcast of Samueli Institute. To subscribe, visit the iTunes store and search for On Human Flourishing. The podcast is also available on our YouTube channel and on our blog at samueliinstitute.org/podcast. Our next episode will feature an interview with Dr. Robert Benacta, the outgoing president of the American Academy of Pain Management. Dr. Benacta grew up in Iran and was exposed to alternative medicine at an early age.
One of the most amazing things about that is how the conventional and what we call complementary here got along. So if someone's going into surgery, they might be having Qigong healing or guided imagery, post-op. There's a heavy emphasis on nutrition and mindful movement like Tai Chi. And there was no turf battles because it was all about the outcome. And it was about, not saying this is Western or Eastern, but it's good for the patient.
Please join us Monday, October 12th for that discussion.